Hi everyone, welcome to my review of The Black Cauldron from 1985, directed by Ted Berman and Richard Rich, and of course the 25th Disney animated classic feature film. So yes, we are back once again ready to discuss Disney, and this time one of the so-called Dark Age films to discuss, and a very, very famous film for being, this kind of box office bomb, and one that's not really regarded too highly among the Disney classics, of course. So yes, will be a spoiler warning for this discussion. If you haven't seen this film, I simply recommend seeing it and then come back to this video, and we can go from there, and we can kind of discuss this film if you want in the comments, and I look forward to that and hearing your thoughts on this film. So yes, with all that said, let's discuss my thoughts on this film. So yes, a fascinating entry here, and one that as a kid, I saw many different Disneys, but this was not one of them. I don't really remember seeing this at all, and I think I would have done if I'd seen this at least, a chunk of this film at least, as a kid, because I always remember, and even when I watch films, it does come back to me, and this one doesn't, and so it was interesting seeing this. I'd heard its reputation, not that I always, take that into account at all, but I thought, who knows what we'll think of this one? Part of the Dark Age, Disney films, this, I think more than any of them, it's kind of mentioned when people talk about, the ages of Disney and, talk about the Dark Age. It was a very unsuccessful film, at the box office. It was well received by some critics, I guess, and they were quite, big on the film. It's always talked about this film, and it was fascinating to see this film finally. I massively love fantasy films, and, I do love Disney as well. This is kind of a dark fantasy film, of course, set in this land of Prydain, and we have this character, the main character of Taran, who is this kind of naive, young boy who's wanting to be a warrior someday, and he sets out in that first act, as we know, the main kind of drive of the film is him trying to protect and take to safety his pig, Henwin, of course, and really such a cute, pig in this film, and of course we have Dorban, who is this, kind of older man who is kind of with Taran, and he's the one that says, of the kind of the worries of, if this pig gets in the hands of the Horned King, who is the main villain of the film, he'll be able to have this unstoppable army and rule the world in that kind of sense. So it's this classic, kind of fantasy, setup. I found this film to be, we'll start off by saying, is this the worst Disney film that I've seen personally? No, I don't personally think so. I do think I will actually, go further and say it started off good, and I think even after watching this film, it was more of a disappointment, because there's such potential here. I think, I was thinking, wow, this is a really, interesting source material, and I think some aspects of this film throughout, were impressive, and I thought it just, when it got to a point, it did get to a point where I wasn't invested in the film really, and it was becoming more and more dull. Just by the end of this film, it wasn't satisfying enough, and I thought, wow, that started off, good, I was very invested at times, in that, first act, and it kind of reeled me in. It was a really good setup at times, the lore. So it's more of a disappointment, what this film could have been, and for a number of reasons, which I'll explain, it did go off the rails, and overall it didn't amount to, this satisfying, kind of charming, consistently Disney adventure fantasy film. So obviously we have Taran, who is the main protagonist, and one of the first things I did notice is, it's a bit rough around the edges in that sense. I think the backgrounds, are stunning actually at times. Some really, impressive animation in this film, despite, the reputation of this being, perhaps the worst looking Disney film. I thought it looked really good at times. Some of the animation is quite, stunning, and the backgrounds. And the main issue I had was with, the character models. Not necessarily, some of them looking perhaps generic fantasy characters, because that didn't really matter too much. There was a charming enough feel to it, and with what the characters were doing. But that could definitely be said. But it was more the way they were interacting with those backgrounds. Just certain objects, and walls and stuff that were getting destroyed, or things, people going through different environments, and it was kind of appearing off, and it was a bit off-putting, and just didn't quite mesh. And it didn't really fully work for me, and it did. There was just a couple of spots in this film that didn't look too great at all, but for the end result. But it has got the combination of amazing backdrops at times, and I think the designs, of this and just the atmosphere I think that's created through the world building, the animation, I thought was really really impressive, and that first act, 25 or so minutes was something I was following along. I thought the storytelling was good. I was invested in the characters. I think Taron is not one of the best protagonists, in Disney, but he was fine enough, and I thought, obviously we've got John Hurt as well playing the Horned King, an interesting setup for sure with the Horned King, and his the things around him, and I thought it'd be interesting to see where this one goes. It's interesting design. It's quite creepy. And I think the pig, Henwin, that was the best part of the film. The interactions and that warm feeling I got from Taron and Henwin, and the fact that he is tasked with this, trying to protect and take Henwin to safety, and that was something that straight away was very relatable, investing. I could get into this film, and it was using the cuteness of Henwin the pig. She's a really cute pig, and especially the bit where she has a belly rubbed, and it's just a really cute moment, of course. And just I think Dorban as well. The way he kind of briefed Taron, and they kind of parted ways, and he was off for this adventure. I really thought wow, this is probably going to be quite good. But then the back of the mind was why is this so pando? At times, and I think as we go throughout the rest of the film, the darker it becomes, the more dull it becomes, and it's just one of those unfortunate things. There isn't quite, for me personally, obviously, that blend of the dark edge of the fantasy with the charm, the magic that was required here. I think the characters, when more of them come into it, Gurgi, I think is a mixed bag. At times, throughout, he is still cute and innocent, and kind of in a way charming, but there is the kind of element of just it's a bit of a strange character, and doesn't quite fully work, in the charming way that I think perhaps was intended. We also have a Longwy that comes into the film around that 25-minute mark. She starts interacting with Taron, and more and more of these characters coming into it, and I was thinking these aren't great for me, and it became a bit of a slog, unfortunately. I think especially that character, Longwy, she wasn't for me very good, and it just kind of they all kind of went on their adventure together, and it kind of broke up, the kind of that narrative flow, I feel, and it was very meandering. I think wasn't much done in the middle and the final act really, that I was invested in with the villain. The villain really went downhill. Didn't amount to much personally for me. There are some things to praise, the voice acting there, but overall I just found it to be flat, and I found all these different kind of magical creatures that came into it, and I was thinking that's not really there isn't really a sense of wonder I personally found with the way that different characters and creatures are introduced here, and it just became a bit of a slog and very dull, and a bit lifeless at times. The final act, we have certainly spectacle. I do praise some of the final act. Again, one or two interesting action sequences as well, but at times underwhelming. When of course he's getting the chains off that door, and they go through the river there, and they kind of escape. There's something about that moment there which was really off as well. And at times certain sequences are just a bit too basic. It could have been more exciting and more tense, perhaps. Even when Taron at first, kind of just simply kicks, the villain off of him, the Horned King, and is kind of going back into the Cauldron there. That moment with the Horned King, that was very underwhelming in the kind of climax, the real climax, with the villain really. And of course, we do have the witches as well, as we know, in this film, and I think the three witches, the sisters. They're really one of the worst aspects of this film. I didn't find them to be interesting really, and they became very irritating, very annoying. It's quite a loud film at times, in the wrong ways, and I think those witches, really sum it up. Just very, very annoying there. And, in that final, sequence there in the final act, there's a couple of charming moments, I will say, and nice moments, perhaps with Gurgi. But I think one of the main things that baffles me is there was no, reunion between Henwin and Taron, and I thought, that's just not just me, kind of being, is he a cute pig and all this, I wanted to see. It's just because, I think the film started out, that's the main drive, he was with Henwin, that was his, the main kind of interactions there was between the two of them, and then he was tasked with going off to protect Henwin, and then of course one of the main things was he wanted to rescue Henwin. Obviously, it did get to a point in the middle of the film where Henwin went off and was taken to safety, but then I thought there would have been some kind of reunion in the end. I thought that was baffling to me personally. Just for the way the film started out, it just required that for me, and that was missing. And obviously, we do have the characters, including Taran, of course, walking off there, and we have this kind of interesting, kind of way it ends. It's not really done in too many Disneys, at least. Back then with a kind of end sequence there, but. I think, by the end of it, I thought, wow, that's a real shame. To sum it up, this film, it really is disappointing. I think the potential was so strong here. The material and just the way, the Black Cauldron started off. The lore around this object, of course, this magical object, and the way it could have, brought about, something really, terrifying, of course, and the way that it was kind of, this light first act, and the kind of darkness hinted at, and explained through lore, and I thought that was really well done at times, in that first act, and then when we actually get to the darker stuff in the film, as I say, it's got that feeling of, it just becomes more dull, and it's not really that affecting, unfortunately, and it's not something that's truly dark, and kind of atmospheric. It's just, for me, mostly dull and flat, and lifeless, and it lacks a sense of charm consistently. It lacks humour as well, I feel. It really did need humour, and I think, it was off to, as I say, a good start, a good solid start, and I was invested, but it lost its way, into the film, and it never really recovered for me personally. And so overall, my final rating for this film is a 53%. So yes, that's not entirely a bad score for me. It's not, a high score, of course. I don't like the film overall, unfortunately, but I think, this film had so much potential. It could have been, a really good film. I think it could have been perhaps, in some ways a classic, fantasy, Disney film. But it's a real shame. This one does fall short, for me personally. And I think, is it the worst Disney film, Disney classic feature film animated? Definitely not. I think there are a few that are considerably worse than this. But I think, this one, it kind of pains me more because, it just could have been so good, and it did start off, very investing at times, and I thought, it was off to a good, charming start, definitely in that first act, but it lost its way, and it's just that sense of, in the end, what this is just an unsatisfying, lacking in comedy, lacking in charm, and sense of magic and wonder of a fantasy Disney film. It could have been so much more, and in the end, it just was very unsatisfying, and very, in that sense, I didn't really gain too much from this narrative. I don't think Taran really went on a meaningful journey, from after Act 1 through, the rest of the film, and you could say, in a surface level way he did, but it wasn't really for me in the sense that I felt this, and was really that moved by it at all. So in the end, it is kind of, it did become lifeless. It was, one that lacked charm consistently, and, lacked interesting characters really around Taran, because he was obviously, solid, I found, but, a lot of the other characters just, that were introduced, other than Gurgi, because that was quite a nice, kind of side character in a sense, but, the rest of the characters just weren't for me really. The witches as well that came into it, and just in the end, the villain, the Horn King, interesting design, obviously, really cool design, but wasn't really big on the villain in the end. Yeah, that's a shame. Starting off with Dorban, Taran, Henwin, it's just really, really nice there, and it just lost its way, and in the end, it was very underwhelming overall, and it could have been so much more. Not a bad film, but definitely for me personally, just a mediocre one. It does, it falls under par, and it does fall short, and it isn't for me anything close to what it could have been, and there's some real interesting moments in this, and it just didn't amount to an overall consistently enjoyable or pleasant viewing experience for a Disney feature film. So yes, that's my thoughts. What do you think? It would be fascinating to hear your thoughts on this one. It's a very iconic film, obviously, and there's a lot surrounding this. The history of it. The fact it was a box office bomb, and all this, and kind of the attempts to hide this initially, of course, and even to this day, it's not really circulated too widely. physical media and all this. So yeah, it's a very fascinating film. I would like to hear your thoughts on this. It's a film that I've finally seen for the first time, obviously, and I don't think it's all bad. Obviously, I have praised this film. I do think I did enjoy this film to an extent, particularly in the first act, but then it lost me. So it's a shame, but I do think it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts, and I would recommend seeing this film. See what you think if you've not seen this and you just kind of go through this, and I really would say give it a go because it is quite unique, even if it's not for me. A one that kind of delivers in that sense in its elements and to its promise. But I think yes, it'd be really cool to discuss this film as always, and Disney feature films in the comments and just everything Disney. So yes, as always, take care and thanks for watching.